Good evening, everyone. We're waiting for some people to join us, but a number of people are here, so I thought we would get started. Welcome to this evening's exclusive live Q&A as part of the VIP package for the Canadian premiere of A Most Beautiful Thing. My name's Russell Field. I'm with the Canadian Sport Film Festival. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're just watching the number of attendees rise. That's great. I wanted to let you know that the screening tonight is taking place, or the Q&A tonight is taking place as part of the screening of A Most Beautiful Thing, which we're presenting in partnership with Row Ontario, in particular in support of their Idea Fund. And we're very grateful for the partnership that we've worked together on. I encourage you to head to rowontario.ca to learn more about the Idea Fund, and I suspect this evening's conversation with Arshay Cooper and Kubet Weston will lead you to learn more. I wanted to mention in particular that Arshay Cooper appears tonight courtesy of Hudson Boat Works, and I wanted to give a very special shout out to Craig McAllister and everyone at Hudson Boat Works who are very much walking the talk in relation to the issues that we'll be talking about tonight. And I can confidently say that tonight's event would not have happened without the participation of Hudson Boat Works, and we are very grateful for Hudson being along. I'd like to thank all of the team at the Canadian Sport Film Festival as well, who've helped bring tonight's event together, in particular Alicia Tyson, who is a rower herself, and I know is excited about tonight's conversation. Tonight's event also would not have happened without Alicia. And thanks also to our partner, Cured Catering, who many of you received something from. A couple of housekeeping details, and then I want to introduce your host for the evening because you don't want to listen to me. So two things I want to let you know. One is that we're recording tonight's Q&A, so you should be aware of that, that we're recording. And the second thing I wanted to let you know is about asking a question tonight. There will be a conversation between our host and Kubet and Arshay, but there will also be time for your questions. A number of you have emailed questions in already, and we're going to enter those into the Q&A function already so that others can see the questions that have come in. If you haven't done that but wanted to ask a question, you're welcome to type it into the Q&A. We will do everything we can to get to all the questions tonight, but understand that we may not get to everyone. We'll try to do what we can. If you'd like to ask your question live, there's a raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen, and you can click on that. You can also just type the phrase into the Q&A, I have a question that I'd like to ask live, and when we have time for questions, we'll find a way to unmute you to do that. The final thing in relation to questions is, as you read the questions in the Q&A, if there's one in particular that you'd like to hear asked, you can upvote it. Which you cooler people than me will know how to do that, but it's next to the questions in the Q&A. Each question will have next to it a button that says upvote, which just raises that question on the list of questions to be asked. So that's the housekeeping for this evening. And now it's time to get started. And to do so, I'd like to introduce our host, a writer, a journalist, an activist, and a public speaker. She writes and speaks regularly on a variety of issues related to sport, including the participation of Muslim women in sport, misogyny, racism, diversity, and inclusion, among many other issues. She appears widely in print in both the sport and the news media, on television. She has a well-deserved place on TSN, thankfully. She's one of 5 remarkable women who have produced the Burn It All Down podcast, which all of you need to go up and sign up for. She's a remarkable journalist, and given the things that we're talking about this evening, she's the kind of voices we need more in sport, and we're very pleased that she's joined us to host the conversation tonight. So tonight's host is Shireen Ahmed, and we're going to turn things over to Shireen now. So thank you all for coming. Shireen, it's all yours.
Thank you, Russell. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm in Mississauga. I just want to take a minute to recognize I land on my own. I realize that this is an online event, but I want to take a minute to recognize that I am on land unceded territory of Anishinaabe and the Mississaugas of the credit. Thank you so much to Kubet Weston and Arshay Cooper. It's an honor for me to be here tonight. I love the Canadian Sport Film Festival. I'm so happy to be part of it. I think is probably my favorite film festival ever. And I realize I live very close to Toronto, and I'm saying that very intentionally. I'm just going to introduce our guests or special guests, and then we can get into a convo. I've met them both. We've had a conversation. We've had a couple of conversations, had a lot of laughter, and I'm so excited to be able to share this with you because it's going to be dope, is pretty much what I feel strongly about. First of all, I'd like to introduce Kubet Weston. And she was born in Nigeria, but in elementary school actually moved to a small southwestern town in Ontario. She achieved early success in high school, winning track awards and setting 2 Canadian records. But her Olympic dream in track was actually sidelined by injury, a knee injury. And after reconstruction and a year of rehab, she went on as a co-op student and then a physiotherapy assistant, which she went on later to study at the University of Toronto, go Varsity Blues, where she also studied physiotherapy, and then has been working as a physiotherapist ever since. And she loves what she does, which is apparent when we speak with her. At the University of Toronto is where Kubet actually began her journey in rowing, and her crew, which actually I will mention that I heard about when I rowed later at University of Toronto, the crew of 94 is pretty damn famous and was later inducted into the Hall of Fame at U of T. She lived and worked in London, Ontario, and competed for Canada as a rower all around the world. She won 4 world championship medals and was a member of the team of the 2000 Olympics in Sydney. She has worked as a physiotherapist with the elites, the Canada elites, both at the National Training Center in London and also traveling internationally with them. Her Olympic story is one of perseverance and of giving back. I could go on for a really long time, but what I will say is that it's an honor to be sitting here with her. She's famous, and I'm so happy to be sharing space. Also, there's rumors that she does the Running Man really well, but we can talk about that later in the panel. No, okay, maybe not. I'm also super excited, very, very jazzed to introduce Arshay Cooper, who, if you've seen the film, you know who he is. He is a rower, a Benjamin Franklin award-winning author. The book is amazing. I highly, highly recommend it. And he's a protagonist of the critically acclaimed film, A Most Beautiful Thing, a Golden Oar recipient for his contributions to the sport of rowing, motivational speaker and activist, particularly around issues of accessibility for low-income families. Arshay works with the George Pocock Foundation and A Most Beautiful Thing Fund to bring rowing to under-resourced communities. And his book can be purchased anywhere books are sold. In the film, A Beautiful Thing is on Xfinity, Comcast, Peacock, and Amazon Prime. And it's inspired A Most Beautiful Thing shoe by Fila. I did not know that, and I'm very excited about that. So that's big. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Shireen.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Okay, so we're just going to dive right in here. We're going to start off, and as many of the viewers already have seen and watched, Most Beautiful Thing, what a riveting story, Arshay. I have so many questions for you about the tights, which we all know when we first talked, I wasn't sure about what was going to happen. I do want to say that one of the things that I did want to talk about with you, because I think I want to start off with a moment of levity, considering how difficult of a year it's been with so many discussions and addressing issues of violence against Black communities and racial injustice. I want to talk about the joy you hold in the space, and rowing is a form of joy. And I had the opportunity, everybody, to speak with both of them. And when they speak of rowing, you see it on their faces, that joy and that serenity. Talk to me about joy and how you wanted to bring it forward in the film, because you hear it in the book. Tell me about that, please.
Yeah. Thank you. Again, thanks everyone for watching the film. Thank you, Hudson, for bringing me out and to Canada. I'm just so excited. I think that for me, I had a lot of questions, as a young person, and every year I would say, "Oh, what a year," because of the structural limitations that we have. And a lot of young people say it now these days, "Oh, what a year." We talk about 2020. But for me, the question I always had was, how do I let this fire inside of me shine brighter than the fire that's going on around me? And not just me, but a lot of young people. And so when you look at the west side of Chicago, it's a place where talent is everywhere, humor is everywhere, but access and opportunity is not, right? And when opportunities come, when joy comes, you jump in the water and you allow it to take you where you need to go, because it is urgent for us to be a part of something, and whatever we take hold of, to just bring it back to others. That's the way we were raised. And so when I went out on that water, I had a lot of fear, right? But our coaches say, hey, every time you conquer a fear, life get a lot less scary. And once we got out there, it was, before it became a sport of competitiveness, it was a sport of meditation. And the same survival mode that told me, when you hear a gunshot run, told me, in order to get back to the dock safely, you have to pull together. And once we all started pulling together, that's when we found the magic in the boat. And we were able to really, although we had our own differences, right? Although structural limitation has destroyed the unity that our parents once had, being isolated in this sport and being the only brung us together. And we found truly through ourselves who we ought to be, and what we want to do in the sport. And so it wasn't the fact that just the boat was sitting there and it was a pair of oars. It was the youth development coaches we had, and it was the storytelling that we brung to each other. And we used all that, the whole pie to find joy in the water.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And Kubet, you had a different experience, because you remarked that although Arshay was from a Black community and the only in the sport, you were not from a Black community. So tell me a little bit about your connection to joy in rowing.
Yeah, so just a little bit of my background. I was born in Nigeria, and my parents actually met at U of T. So my mom's Canadian, my dad's Nigerian, and they moved in the mid to late 70s to Nigeria, where I was born. So my first memories are of my mom being the minority. Nigeria is it's an all Black community, and I went to school there, and the first memories for me were not of standing out as being particularly different, aside from the fact that my mom was white. And then it was a time in the early 80s where Nigeria, it was militant rule there. So she left with 3 kids and a suitcase, and we started from scratch back in small town Ontario. And we were moving. She gave up a lot. I think she gave up love. She gave up a job and a life in that community. But what we got in Canada was safety. And I knew that as a child. But when you come into a community, there was 10,000 people in Tillsonburg, or maybe less than. And my siblings and I were one of only 3 non-white people in that community. And you stand out every day for like my name was Kubet Weston, and that was the name that I started school with, and cornrows in my hair and dark skin, and single mom. So there were so many things that you stood out for that you had no control over. And I think what I found on the schoolyard first with running was just that joy in terms of success and connection. And it puts you on a playing field where you can compete and you can have fun, and you don't stand out just for your skin color, for the things that you can't control. And so, when you talked about, when we had a private conversation just about the love of the sport and how I got into rowing, I was a reluctant rower. My sport that I was passionate about initially was track, because I'd go to a track meet, and I remember going to OFSA for the first time. And my coach told me afterwards, he said, I looked at your face, and, I remember being in a stadium in Etobicoke, and there was Black people, there was brown people, there was tall, short, it was so eye-opening to me. And I felt like I didn't stand out for the way that I looked. I stood out for my competitiveness and for my fire and for my drive and for my performance. And unfortunately, and my Olympic dream was about the opportunity. For me, it was an opportunity because we were poor. Like we didn't come from a place of having a lot of money, and track was something that could have led to the Olympics. And for me, it was like, you know, the success of that would have meant a scholarship possibly and university, and not having to worry about some of those financial limitations. So when I tore my ACL and I gave up that side of myself, there was something that was a little, you know, just a little broken. And I had to find ways to succeed in other levels. And I struggled for a while, and then realized that I could give back through sport, through my profession, finding physiotherapy. And I started rowing at U of T only because I got a personal invitation. I was at the athletic center and somebody came up to me and said, "You're tall, do you want to try rowing?" And my brother had rowed in high school. We had a great little community rowing club at Tillsonburg Rowing Club. And I tried it once and I was like, yes, you know, I don't know why I said yes, but I said yes. And for me, rowing was so healing. And the joy was connecting with that side of myself again and finding my community at U of T and finding that dream, that Olympic dream again.
I find that so fascinating because there's aspects of what both of you are talking about. For me, when I wrote at U of T, it was in response to, after deciding to wear a headscarf, I wasn't able to play soccer anymore. So rowing didn't have this type of restrictions where they were accommodated for things like this. Like it was almost like soccer being my first love, rowing didn't care what you wore as long as you pulled hard. And that worked for me. So it's funny that, you know, our experience is somewhat similar. It's something I came into. For me, fortunately, I was able to go back to soccer later, which was my first love. And the longest relationship I've ever had has actually been with soccer. So that's a different topic for a different time. But I think one of the things that I'm so fascinated by Arshay is that your connection to it. Like, I will have a couple of questions for you. Did you continue to row after high school, and did you stay connected with, because the book is predominantly, and I really do hope people get it because it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it's available on audiobook too. Did you stay connected to the rowing community? Because, you know, when you row, you always feel connected to it. Did you continue with that? Because we know Kubet did stay within the fold of rowing and still is. Did you continue as well?
Yeah, I did. You know, I did by volunteering, being a volunteer coach with the same program. That's the way I stayed connected. But I didn't go to college. I had other dreams. But, you know, I've never seen anyone on the college level that looked like me, right? I didn't even know that there was Anita DeFrance. Like there was a Black Olympian, right? And at that time, there was only two. It rowed in 67 games or something like that, or 68.
68, yeah.
Yeah, 68. And, you know, and so I knew honestly what it felt like to be around my team and feel the stares, right? Or feel like I'm not a part, right? Or walk into boat houses and the images on the wall, like no one looks like you, right? But I had good scores, good erg scores. And I could have rowed in college, but I didn't want to be alone because I even felt alone with my boys who looked like me, right? And we kept each other safe. And so I went another route. And I knew I wanted to give back. I knew this sport was amazing. So I stayed connected, honestly, by the things I done outside of the boat, right? And helping the programs recruit young people on the high school level.
One of the things that I want to just pick up on something you said, and Kubet, throw it to you, the stairs. Like you participated, and you're Canada's first Black woman, oarswoman at the national program. The stairs, when you competed, like very much when we talk about, or when we read the book and we see the story of, and I know I do realize that I'm referring to the book a lot, and, you know, but also it's reflected in the film as well, that the stares and the looks, that's very palpable, that emotion. Did you experience the same thing when you traveled internationally with Canada?
I can't say that it necessarily. I knew that there weren't many Black rowers, and I knew that it stood out. Like, I knew Akil, that was one U.S. rower. There was a couple of other people that, and I thought I was under the impression that when I started rowing at an international level, I would see more Black rowers, and I didn't. I remember being really disappointed at one point, you know, hearing about the South African rowing team, and there wasn't a single Black person on the South African rowing team. And things are changing now. Like, it's changing, which is great. But I think from my experience growing up, that was just the looks and the stares. They became background noise. We had to learn to, as kids, because we didn't have, we had each other, but because we didn't look like anybody else in the community, I had to put that aside, and just, you know, you just keep plugging away. You got to keep your goal in mind, and I think that's something that I took, you know, from my childhood that carried through. That there's things that there's systemic things that are really challenging. There's systemic things that hold you back. But there's some things that you can't change in terms of how people are going to feel about you just by looking at you. And if you have the opportunity to interact with that person, you have the opportunity to be on a crew with that person, to be on the start line, then it becomes a different ballgame. Then they're just not looking at you because of how you look and the color of your skin or what you're wearing.
And Arshay, one of the things I wanted to ask you, when you work in predominantly racialized communities, do you get the same kind of attitude that you described when you walked into that gym and saw a boat? Do you get the same reactions from kids now that are Black or brown, and they're like, who is this man, and what is the sport he's talking about? Like, do you get that?
Yes, I do get that. I had one kid right before COVID. I was at a school, and he said, dude, have you seen Titanic? You know, like I get it every single time, of course. And, a lot of these young kids didn't have experience, right, with the water, right? And but once I open my mouth and talk about the beauty of the sport, right, and the things that you will experience, and it's just not only that this sport takes, young people and expose them to the world, right? You may race only once in your city, and every race is somewhere else, and what you will find, right? Although there are no cheerleaders, there's no busload of fans, there are no $1 million contracts after college, you'll find a group of people who will show up every day, right? And break their backs and rip apart their hands for the person who sits in front of them and the person who sits behind them, right? And with no hidden agenda. And I remember saying, that's the kind of people I need in my life. And so we go there, and when we recruit, we storytell. We talk about everything that you need now. Somehow we figure it out, and we use the sport to help get those things. And eventually they try it out, and we go from there.
One of the questions that I was going to ask, but Kubet already answered it so beautifully, is when I was asking about the stares or the looks. Very much your life experience, Kubet, had already prepared you for that kind of moment anyway, and how within the world of rowing, that prepared you as well. You were already equipped with it. But one of the questions I want to ask is, the community work that you've done, and Kubet, you're still, very involved, and as a profession, you help heal athletes. So like, you're still very much in that realm, and wellness is a big part of it. But wellness and emotional and psychological wellness is a big part of being an elite athlete as well. And Arshay, you're involved with the George Pocock community and, reaching out wellness as well and providing, those opportunities for youth. But let's talk about the organizations. Like, let's roll up our sleeves and talk about this, because we know that the conversations need to be happening, whether it's FISA, whether it's Rowing Canada, whether it's USA Rowing. Let's talk about it on a wider scale. And are those conversations happening in the way we need them to be, particularly in light of what's happened this past year? I mean, the murder of George Floyd was arguably, and I say this as a sports journalist, was a catalyst for a lot of conversations that needed to happen. And Kubet, I'm going to start with you. Are the conversations happening? And if they're not, why aren't they happening or haven't happened yet?
They're happening, and I'm happy to be involved in the Diversity and Inclusion Committee with Row Ontario. So I know they're happening at a national level, they're happening at a local level. I know they're happening, people reached out to me individually, so I know they're happening in the rowing community. Like you said earlier, it's a small community, and once you're in it, and people are talking about it, and change is definitely happening. And I think there's been momentum for a little while in terms of on an organizational basis, like with FISA and World Rowing. There is a place now for developing nations. So they have a qualifier in Africa, there's one in South America, there's one in Asia and Oceania, because they need representation. The Olympics is about the world. And beyond that, I think the health of our communities is something that we can really elevate a whole community through movement and through sport and through connection with that. And it ties into education, it ties into health. There's so many things that are tied into healthy communities and taking care of yourself and looking after your spirit and your mental health. I think where so it's a start. I think we need to get some action going, and people are looking for ways to do that. I think it's been happening in local communities, and there's been some people that have spearheaded different things in their own local boat clubs. But I think we need to go with that tailwind. The current's going in one direction, the tailwind is there. We can't not have these conversations, I think, within rowing in Canada.
Sorry, mute myself and then try to find the mouse pad to unmute myself. No, very much conversations need to be happening for every sport, but particularly this one, because it's predominantly, the lack of diversity within the sport, and sometimes the access to resources or access to equipment. And Arshay, do you feel that as well mirrored in the US? I mean, the conversations between Canada and the United States are really not that different. It's not like racism stops at the border, right? Like, it's pervasive, and we live and we're seeing the systems of white supremacy permeate all over the world come to the forefront. How do you feel that the US is doing it and in grassroots levels? Do you think we're hitting where we need to?
Yeah, the conversation is happening like never before, right? And I mean, on the collegiate level, the local level, right? And now even more so with US rowing. I would say that there has always been a handful of people of color who's been really trying to push the conversation, right? And as we all know, after George Floyd was murdered, it seemed like a lot of other people were no longer in denial about what's really happening in this country and in our sport. And so a lot of allies have shown up, right, in this sport, I would say in the US and ready to do something. And I think what changed is that it's not just white people saying, okay, I know what we have to do. All right, we leaning on Arshay, Akil, Anita. Okay, what can we do? What do we need to do? What are the next steps, right? And so it's really happening. And I think that what's really going to help, because we have always reached out to the community, the Black community, Hispanic community, to recruit young people, and they show up. The problem has been the retention, right? Not only on the youth level, but on the collegiate level. So many young people of color have quit their college team, because not only they're the only person of color, but there's also like 95% of people on the team who never even interacted with someone who looked like them, right? And if a Black child is murdered in Chicago in a collegiate rower, post Black Lives Matter, someone in their boat who disagree or, say something and you're the only one and you don't feel protected, you leave the team, right? And I think coaches wasn't sure or never been equipped to handle these conversations and these problems. So now on the national level with US rowing, we're now adding that anti-racism, DEI training, the same way we offer safety, right? And so I think that's gonna really, really shift things in a way.
Kubet, just scaffolding off of that, your experience in terms of support in moments like that, had you experienced loneliness and sort of isolation in ways during your experience? And like, what would be your offering to people listening, coaches and programmers, to help support athletes better, racialized athletes?
I think there's often an intersection between a racialized athlete and maybe a difference in their socioeconomic, there's often a socioeconomic piece, and there's challenges that coaches might not be aware of, but I was never asked. And I think just making a little bit of space for that, I think would be a good thing. And I felt very supported by my teammates. I think there was that connection there that it's a lifelong connection. Like I still meet every week with my U of T rowing girls, and we do a Zoom workout. And I think once you bond over, that shared experience, it can be lifelong. But I think on a national level, it was a lot more challenging to, I think, make that step from being a high school or a collegiate level rower into the elite level, because there were challenges that I would never admit to my rowing teammates, because you were fighting for your seat on the boat. So if you admitted any weakness at all, somebody would pounce on that weakness. You just couldn't reveal that there were challenges. Maybe you couldn't show up for that 4 p.m. practice because you had to work. And it wasn't that you had to work because you had a choice about working. It's because, for me, I had OSAP debt. So I came out of university having to pay for my entire 4 years of university. And my first summer on the national team was the first time since I was 9 years old that I didn't have a job. I had a paper route, I babysat, I saved my money to go to university. I took out the student loan in order to get through university. And I had amazing family support, not just my mom, but my entire family. But that giving up some of that financial independence for something that wasn't guaranteed, you were fighting for your seat. And that was a big challenge that I don't think was necessarily supported. We might get equal carding, but that's only if you achieve a certain level. So how do you get to that level? And I was very fortunate to be part of such a strong women's rowing program in Canada that my first year on the team, I got the top level of carding funding, but that covered my rent and it covered my OSAP loan. It didn't cover my cost of living. So I think there's some additional steps from the way some of the things work kind of systemically in terms of allowing that level of participation. And then you also want to have those heroes in sport that look like you. And I didn't have that in rowing. I had a lot of heroes in rowing, but I didn't have anybody that looked like me. And it's hard to be, it's hard when nobody's done that journey before, I think.
And that's why this event is so impactful and important, because both of you are heroes and a shero to so many people out there, which is incredibly important. I also think that, you know, Kubet, what I'm hearing also you say is that even they're all connected, so many of the systems, and you're absolutely right. And I think that as an elite level, and we could have a whole other film on like how women athletes in this country are underfunded. Like we could do the whole we could do a whole week long on that in itself. But just the idea when you layer it with the different challenges and needs required by racialized athletes in their spaces while being very competitive. Because Arshay, you were, and there was something that really hit me watching the film, is that you're brothers. And it wasn't just the relationship between you and Alvin and Malcolm and Preston. And my favorite is Pookie G. I got to say that. I love y'all, but like Pookie G was my fave. He was like, Coxies have a special place in my heart. They're the smallest and the loudest, but I was because I saw the film and I literally screamed when he came up because I was so excited. You know, I would have run into him one day in Chicago and be like, Pookie. So, but just that you talked about brotherhood, and now Kubet saying she's still, I mean, respect for you to still do erg workouts. I mean, I haven't run in a year, but just that how you it was brotherhood. So you didn't have the same type of necessarily competition happening because y'all were going together. Like it wasn't just setting the strokes properly and being synchronized. It was literally every single one being together. And are your relationships, Arshay, still like that with those crewmates?
Yeah, I mean, we Zoom just without the ergs and the workouts.
That's amazing.
We leave that in the past. No, I mean, our relationship, we're so tight. And I think that our vision aligns, right? Like we all have our career, but what we've learned, so, you know, as young people, especially sitting in those entrepreneurship classes every Thursday in high school, which was part of our rowing program, was to truly just continue to give back, right? And so you have someone who has a moving company, but they only hire high school seniors, boys and girls that work for the moving company to pay for their prom and pay for their own graduation, right? You have Preston who give free haircuts on Sundays all day, right? You have Malcolm that's hiring young people, and you have the work that I do. And I think that what holds us together is not just that brotherhood, but those values that we learned when we was young, and then we feed off each other for ideas, right? I mean, 22 years later, the conversation has changed, but what we shared was truly special. And I think that when you go through that much pain for so many hours a day, right, and travel, and in those long van rides or bus rides, you really become brothers and sisters in this sport.
I found that captivating, like the stories and woven in through the film, and how everyone's own challenges. And I mean, sometimes I like to avoid using the word resilient, because I find that if it's not contextually placed, it can come off as being a little bit shallow, because I mean, it's not as if you have the choice to be resilient. It's about survival. So you're just going to do you. You're just going to it's not as if, but the way that you and your teammates. And I also did have to say that in the film, and this is in the spoiler because everybody's seen the film now, Pookie J gave up his spot to Coxswain because he felt he wanted to give the best for the team. That was also incredibly generous of him to do, because to say that because of the conditions and the flooding, he wanted somebody who could give the best for the team, but he was still a part of that. Like that, there's a reason this man is my favorite. Like, I mean, you know what I'm saying?
And that's the point of rowing, to act beyond yourself, you know? And that's exactly what he did.
Exactly. So, I mean, we could do another whole event on Pookie G, but like what I'm saying is that those connections that you have, and if both of you need to do, because I'm seeing so many questions about people asking about youth outreach and sport and development, and youth absolutely goes together globally. I mean, we see how sport is used in different places around the world to help youth and young girls and boys with PTSD, which is something that came up. We see it being used in refugee camps post-Syria, like being used. And even in the film, and this really struck me, that vets, when they come back from war, have a certain amount of PTSD. And I believe it took the notes down that I think it was up to 30 or 35% in the west side of Chicago when they interviewed the psychologist in the film, and that this was a method. Is that something that you weave in to the work you do too, Arshay?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I want to go into the neighborhoods that are like the ones that I grew up, right? And, you know, again, like I can talk about redlining and structural limitations, and this is a result of Jim Crow laws and many different things like that. But tomorrow morning, these young people are still walking out of their doors, right? And running for their lives. They're skipping over pools of blood. And like I said in the book, we experienced what some soldiers have experienced in war before we were 15 years old. And you look at, when there's a mass shooting in the States in private schools, right away, they send in trauma counselors. We never had access to that, right? 700 kids and one school counselor, right? No one on my team has ever talked to a school counselor in high school. And so that's why the beauty of outdoors, the beauty of this sport is rhythmic, right? That constant motion, right? Just to be near the water, even if you're not rowing, it's a lot of healing. And I think that, you know, it's, you know, the teachers used to say, you guys are a walking storm, but like this sport truly calms the storms in you because it's non-combative, it's non-conflict. I played football and it would trigger my trauma. I played basketball. It's a trash talking sport and it would trigger trauma. And this sport was the first sport that did not. And I think that's why it works. So it's important to incorporate some of those lessons to help reduce trauma. Only one person's talking and they saying, sit tall, breathe, you belong here, pull, right? And it's a lot of beauty in that, a lot of healing in that as well.
I just wanted to kind of touch on that, Arshay, because I think there's a lot of people talk about the pain in rowing. And as a physiotherapist, you know, I help people to heal, you know, you're healing from injury, but you can have a physical pain and then there's suffering. And I think they're two different things. So when you see a person that has done a really hard workout and they're in pain and they're pushing harder, that's one thing. When you see somebody that, you know, they're suffering, it's not just affecting their muscles, it's affecting their mind, it affects their spirit, it affects their interaction with the world. And I think sport can be so healing for that suffering. And I think you do build a level of resilience, but you have to allow the space for somebody to breathe, for somebody to release that tension. You know, one of the mantras that I use in terms of my treatment of people is I'm treating the whole person. I'm not just treating a shoulder. I'm not treating a knee. I'm not treating a back. You are treating the whole person, and you have to release whatever is causing that pull, that injury, that tension. And one of the ways in is just through the breath. So you have somebody that's been carrying around pain for a long time and they're suffering, and you get them to tap into their breathing and it changes things. You know, it lowers your stress levels, it lowers your cortisol, it allows you to get away from that fight or flight. And I connected with that on multiple levels when I saw the film, because it brings to light how much you can heal and how much you can heal, not just on an individual level, but suffering, you know, on a community level like Arshay had.
So let's take the metaphor of rowing and let's say we're in a 2,000 meter sprint, okay? And the whole idea is momentum. In conversations and policies, and y'all can be really frank with me, in conversations and policies of inclusion that are had by coaches and clubs and organizational levels and associations, where are we in that race right now? Are we still in the first 500 meters? Where are we?
I would say still, the first 500 meters. I am
Are we in the boathouse? Like where?
Yeah,
No, we've got to the start line.
Yeah, we got to the start line.
We're in the boat. We're on the start line. There's some anxiety because we don't really know where we're going. We don't know how much it's going to hurt. And I know we talk about this with my teammates. Like sometimes you're on the start line and you think, wow, do I really want to be here? Is this what I've signed up for? And I think we all want to be here. We all need to see that vision. And I think what this film did for me is it allowed me to kind of communicate my story, but it also opens up that vision of what rowing could be and what's, how we can take the sport to the next level. And so I think, yeah, we're definitely on the same boat. And there's going to be some rough strokes and hopefully there's not a crab, but we know we can come back from that. But yeah, there's going to be some challenges, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think that we have to understand that, the biggest lesson I learned in rowing is that I can't do the work of 8 people. I need 8 people to do the work and we'll get there much faster. And sometimes rowing programs will go into a neighborhood and say, we're going to do it all. We're going to get them on the water. That's just not going to work. You have to it's not outreach. Like, I don't like the word outreach. You have to engage the community, right? You have to get everyone involved to get this boat moving. You saw the film Craig Nash. He was not a rower, right? But he knew the community. He knew how to work with parents. He knew how to connect with community leaders. So later on, they brought him in to do that, right? And we connected with him, right? Coach Victor, he wasn't a rower. He was a strength and conditioning coach, but he looked like us, right?
Mm-hmm,
and they hired him on. You don't have to just hire a rower to do the community work, right? You hire someone who lived there, who know how to make things happen, who knows people, right? And it's also gonna help you understand the community a little bit more, right? And I think that is so important. I think I was telling you, Shireen, that, for my mom, when she saw Coach Victor was on staff, a Black coach, because she's from the South, she understood that, okay, now my son is going to be safe in this white space, right? And someone understands what it's like to be him. So I am going to deliver my son to this sport, right? And that is so important. So it's really important that we all understand what the barriers are, but we need to understand that through working with the community, right? And we all know that it's cost, transportation, right, and swimming. Like everyone say those are the barriers, but those are like the structural barriers. But then you get to the boathouse, it's bad boathouse culture. It's not warm and welcoming, right? Like the decor, like I said, the images don't reflect the young people you're trying to put in your seat, right? Coaches can't really relate to you. You don't show up, right? And you don't get in the boat, but they don't understand that most of the girls on our team quit because they were babysitters, right? For their own little brothers and sisters because mom had to work 2 jobs or they had to work a job. It wasn't that they didn't want to row, right? And so but the way we understand that, it's not just by reading books, but really hiring people from the community and building relationships with the community. So that's how we get the 8 moving, right? And so how do we get those folks from those communities involved and we work together? Not you just come and say, I'm going to save these young people. That's not going to work. It's not going to happen. And I think then I will shut up after this, is when we're able to do that and get young people rowing and the community involved, the last issue that I see that is so hard, that people will look at these young people and say, oh, it's a great program. They're just not as competitive and not as fast. And that's why I'm so grateful for Hudson, right? And what they do, how they partner with us to give boats to these brand new boats to these young people. The problem is that these young kids are strong. They're committed. They, like I was telling Kubet, they have the oldest boats around. They have the most novice coach because that's all they can afford. They can only practice 3 or 4 days a week because that's all they can afford, right? And they live so far from the water, right? And you can't really pay for transportation. And those are things that we need to solve, right? Not just bring young kids in to get them in the boat and they get slaughtered on the water, but really work on creating an equitable experience on the water so they can compete with everyone else. And so there's a lot of layers to it, right? But I think the way we solve that is by listening to the community, listening to those young people that you recruit, and move the organization with their ideas, because they would tell you.
Okay, so I want to take everything you said and framed it, both of you, because in our conversations, what I love of both of you are echoing each other. And Kubet, when we talked, you talked about barriers. Arshay has absolutely underlined them and highlighted the importance of not being saviors, not being white saviors of coming in and doing it. There's so many other factors involved here, and truly understanding. And I feel like I want to repeat that to everybody out there listening. But also, Kubet, you said something that really stuck with me. You said you want to contemplate new visions of what growers are. And that is so important, because I know we heard the word representation, and if you can't see it, you can't be it. But no, you're blazing this trail, and you didn't see anyone looking like you. I mean, until I saw this film, Arshay, at one point, there's this incredibly poignant shot of someone pulling, and the tattoo, the sleeves on the arm, which I got to tell you, I've never seen before. I haven't seen tattooed people that are melanated in a boat. Like, I've never seen that. And it gave me something. It was enriching. It was, I mean, Kubet, I knew that you existed when I was at U of T, because everybody told me that, oh, because I was also, racialized grower. Oh, but Kubet, yes, I know. And I went to the ACC, and I saw the athletic center, and I saw your photo on the wall, like you're a legend. So it was like that. But like Arshay, for me to be able to say and point young folks to you and say, no, you need to hear the story, not just about the rowing, because your story is not. And what I love about you both is your stories are not just about rowing. Rowing is definitely interwoven in it, but the what you're bringing out and what you're offering back to the communities and working in and talking about how, Kubet, on a psychophysical level, everything that you understand so intrinsically, and Arshay, community level as well, that you're giving people all this knowledge. So again, I want to be the first to say thank you to both of you. There's a list of so many questions that I would like to get to as well. I'm sort of sitting here fangirling at the same time, and also just like trying to take notes and do all this. I would request everybody who's listening, there's some questions that I've seen that are direct requests to connect with either Kubet and Arshay, and I would ask that those aren't necessarily questions. So if you have interest in connecting with Arshay, you can contact the Canadian Sport Film Festival at the Gmail account, and they can forward all of those to him, because that's not time that I necessarily want to take up in the Q&A for both of these incredible people. So that is my request to you. So if you did have a question that involved connecting directly with them, please contact the CSFF, and they will forward on to both Kubet and Arshay through the proper channels. So please don't think I'm ignoring your question. It's just that I'm compartmentalizing it in network. Okay. So we're going to start off. First question. And some of them I will say have been answered in the question. So if there's any that, if you feel that you don't want to, you can waive it. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how we want to do this. Okay, so what advice, this is from John Oxley, and I'm not sure, John, if you want to answer it, or... Sorry, Carol, you gave me instructions on this, and I seem to be forgetting them already on how to do this.
Dawn is actually here to answer the question, I believe. Or
No,
ask.
Yeah, I just put the question forward, and I think Arshay touched upon it earlier, but my question is, what advice would you give to coaches who are involved in these different outreach programs and are really engaging with new communities and groups that they really don't have a lot of familiarity with? And I think that's why I said, I think Arshay, you touched on it. The intention can be really good, but it may not work out if everybody's not on the same page.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think that's why I say it's important to hire someone from that community, even if they're not a coach, right? Because they understand and they can help the team understand that you don't want to go to just outreach. Sometimes people go into schools and they recruit, and then the school won't see them again until next year, right? But how can we build a partnership with the school? How can we go in there and say, hey, we want to do PE takeovers with the erg machines once a month, right? We want to, every time someone doesn't make the basketball, football, baseball team or volleyball team, we want to be the first to have a conversation with them to tell them about our sport, right? Every time there's a parent coordinated meeting, we want to give them updates on the young people we have recruited from their school. So the hope that more young people get involved, right? And what can we do on your school service day? Can we come and volunteer in the neighborhood with you guys, right? Are there trainings that we can be a part of that the school offer for their teachers, right? That is around DEI or anti-racism, right? Like, it's really building a partnership with the YMCA, with the public schools, with the families, right? Being a part of their festivals and bringing herbs and understanding how can we serve, right? And learning from them. And I think that's when the relationships start. And when they see you all the time in your face and in your shirt and you show up, even if you said something that can be in microaggression, they understand that your heart's in the right place, but you want to learn, right? And there's forgiveness there because you keep showing up, right? And they would see that this sport is great for their young people, but we have to understand it's not just outreach. It's we want to partner with you to make sure these young people are successful in whatever we can do. And understand the last thing I'll say is that there's a part in the film where Ken said, oh, the kids didn't go on to race, they didn't go to college. I didn't think it was a success. And I think that a lot of times as a rower, we measure success one way, and that's by gold medals. But to our neighborhood, to get guys from different gangs to build a brotherhood, that's a win, right? Our city's been trying to solve that. To culturally overcome the fear of water is a win. To get these guys to travel an hour and 15 minutes on the bus every day to the boathouse, that's a win. And those wins have to be highlighted, right? Not just, you didn't win a gold medal. I'm sorry, try again next year. There's so many wins in this sport, in the boat and outside of the boat. And it's important to be able to understand how the community measures and the school measures success in the same way so we can all align.
Thank you so much for that. The next one is about, and Kubet, I'll throw this one to you. It's from Dan Bichard, and I've heard the message time again that recruiting and retention is directly related to ability to see yourself, people like you. And I like the way this question is phrased. What is the most innovative way you have seen that being done for people of color?
I think social media is an avenue that wasn't available when I was rowing. And I think there's a lot of excellent social media content out there for people of color. There's a site that I was looking at called Black Girls Rowing. And, there's so many things now outside of, you can be living in a small town somewhere or in a community and feeling isolated, but you can connect through social media. And as a parent, social media, it's hard. You want to direct your kids and make sure that they're not seeing. I think that's a win with social media that wasn't around when I was rowing. And I'm sure there was other Black girls rowing when I was rowing that wanted to be super competitive, but I just didn't know that they were out there. And I think now with that, it opens up geography, and you can see like globally that there is a movement. And what Arshay brought up about providing support to these communities, that's what's been identified with World Rowing. It's like we need the representation. We can't just say the doors are open, do it. You can't expect somebody that's never been there to just know how to do it. And if you want representation, you have to give people the tools. And what are the tools in rowing? The tools are equipment. The tools are, rigging. They're knowing how to do a training program. There's multiple levels there where you give people the tools. You give them the time and the space to grow within that sport and to allow that community to build and develop. We have so many other communities that have hundreds of years of history in rowing. And so I think there is such a lost opportunity right now that our rowing community has that opportunity to show, and in one sense, what could be in terms of the pinnacle of the sport, but just to give other communities that haven't had the tools that opportunity to get there.
Thank you. That is so helpful. I also want to mention there's also a Facebook group called Rowers of Color, and they are based in the United States because they spell color the wrong way, C-O-L-O-R, as opposed to C-O-L-O-U-R. Just kidding, everybody. So if you want to look for them and look out for them, and I believe they also have a podcast. So if people are looking for that, there's places out there. The next question we have, Arshay, is for you, from Rachel Davis. And the question is, how much have you developed your idea? Or actually, Rachel's here to ask. Sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
Hi. Yeah, so it comes across quite specific, but you can answer it kind of in a general way. But specifically, I was asking, how much had you developed your idea of including the Chicago police in your crew before you approach them? So like in general, like, I have all these great ideas and I just want to run with them. And I just want to, like, how much before? So I was like, well, actually it's a great idea, but can we just shelve it? Or can you can you go back to the drawing board and can you put that on paper and tell me how much it's going to cost? And so I guess some feel for that would be great.
Yeah, I was thinking that situation with the cops, it was, when they interviewed all the moms, we sat and had food after, and one of the moms said the two things that scares me is my son interaction in a different neighborhood and my son interaction with the police. And I looked at the guys and said, how do we attack both of those issues? How do we help reduce that fear from our moms, right? And one, we already reached out to the community. We're always doing that. So in that sense, I mean, we're always putting things to the paper and making things happen. But for that, it wasn't just I made that decision and said, okay, this is it. I had a conversation with those guys. I had a conversation with some folks from the community. You know what I mean? I never do anything without it being signed off by the community, right? And they don't trust cops, but they trust me because I've been there for a very long time. And what I told the guys was, listen, as a teacher, you will always forget some of your students, but as a student, you'll never forget your teacher. And we have an opportunity to be teachers here. And the guys didn't make this decision based on building the bridge, but it was out of survival, right? If they know our kids' names, if they know my names, because they gonna wake up tomorrow morning, still work in our neighborhood and on my block. And if they know my name, right, that maybe it'll keep us just a little bit safe if we can teach them something and they can learn from us. And I would say that, that only took a couple weeks of planning. I've reached out to people, right? A lot of folks said no, a lot of cops said no. But it was very important to me that whoever's working in our neighborhood on that block, that a few of them can get a chance to just understand who we are and what we do and how important our community is to us. And I tell you, I would say this is that if one of the cops, if you go on his Instagram page, you will see if he hangs out with Alvin, like Black Lives Matter. I've never seen that from a Chicago cop, right? And he's the one, Vic Lou, who was very scared, didn't know how to swim, right? But Alvin helped him and he gravitated towards Alvin. The other cop who kind of rubbed Alvin's head in the beginning, he said after George Floyd was murdered, and we had a group chat, and he said that, a lot of bricks was thrown at me when, at a protest in Chicago. And he said, and I realized that I can take my uniform off, but I can't take my black skin off. And I said, yeah, but I need you to tell your colleagues that, right? And he was like, you're right. And so I knew that these conversations can't happen if I just mailed them my book or if I just mailed them the film. But how can I take them back to the same water where we didn't get along at first, to help them understand who we are? And you guys saw the film. There's no way you can be near those guys and not be moved by them. And I wanted to create that conversation for my block. And so everything I do, I am thinking about our block, our community, not just the sport, but like our community, our block, right? And try to make decisions based on, of course, building bridges, but also surviving, right? And so, yeah, it takes the planning, it takes thinking, but again, it's really having these conversations of what's good for the community. What can we do tomorrow? Not just in the sport, that's awesome, but what can we do for our block?
Can I just intervene quickly, Shireen? Because I want to give Arshay just a little bit of feedback, because I was there in Chicago with my family, with my kids. We had driven down on behalf of Hudson, donating the boat that they rode with the police. So I got a behind the scenes view. I wasn't really participating. And at one point I was just, watching the interaction between Arshay, and he is what you see on the film and more, in terms of what he gives to other people and how he brings people in. And I was kind of watching and filming, and I don't even know what his role was on the crew, but he was like the cameraman or the producer, and he said he is a special person, and you will see how he draws everybody into his circle to make them feel like they have a role to play. And I think we need people like that. We need people that will draw other people in and allow them to use their gifts or use their opportunity. And the producer said, I've been on a lot of film sets, and he doesn't bring ego. He brings people in. And I think that's really, good on you, Arshay, because you could see it, and it was such a good role model for my kids to see. It was a great opportunity.
And I was glad to use Rowan. I feel like if it was basketball, I'd be like, hey, you fouled me. Get out of here, a lot of elbows, So
yeah,
Rowan is perfect. Rowan is perfect.
Yeah.
So I would be remiss if I didn't ask this, because this film was actually 2019. It was produced, correct? And that's something that I wanted to ask you. In the last year, since the conversation has shifted, and I'm sure you have a gift of talking to people, there's no question. I mean, I feel like we're best friends with Kubet already. We'll do Zoom calls. I don't know if there'll be ergs involved, but what I was going to ask was that in the last year that movements, Black Lives Matter, have been calling for defund police. Has that affected your approach in working with the police now? Are you still having the same? Because I can't imagine the conversations were the same ones you were having 2 years ago. So what are they like now?
Yeah, I think that, I made this decision because there were many murders of people who look like me, right? That's why I wanted to invite them out. I think the conversation was, and although we talk with those guys all the time, now it's more uncomfortable, right? When we talk to them in a group chat, but we both understand, even as rowers, we all know as rowers, is that to get the results that you want, you're not comfortable, right? You're uncomfortable. We understand that uncomfortable conversations get us to where we need to be. And they read, not everyone, but some of them read the books that we tell them to read, right? And every time something happens, we get a text. It's almost as if they feel they have to hold themselves accountable to us. And that's great, right? And what we did doesn't change the system, right? And there are times that I struggle, right? Of like, man, I know that I have a gift to build bridges, but there's so much that needs to be said and I need to do. And I do that, when it comes to helping with different policies or protesting. But I understand that, the conversation is continuing, and Alvin and Malcolm, they let no one get away with anything. These conversations are happening. I am just so glad that it's happening with them and not just me and my boys who all really think the same, right? And we're able to get our points across, and we need every movement, right? In the 60s, they had MLK movement, the Black Panthers Party, and NAACP, Malcolm X, and the Nation of Islam. And today we need Black Lives Matter. We need every movement. My way has always been, how do I build this bridge through the sport? And that's what I do.
Awesome. If we have Shauna Bokel out there, Shauna, could you ask your question if you're, if you would like to? Otherwise, I'm happy to ask. You're muted. You have to unmute.
Hello? Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I got booted out and came back in. So I'm not in the rowing community. I actually, I'm from Ontario and did not know there was a Black rower. So I apologize because like I've been in sports for a very long time. And when Rowing Ontario sent this documentary out, it caught my attention that I actually watched it with my family. And we sat here looking at it. And one of the questions we were thinking of, and you kind of touched on it, is Black youth, especially in the GTA in Ontario, are so pigeonholed to certain sports. How would you, or how would you try and, I wouldn't say convince them, but how would we work with the youth to try something new that they're not used to seeing, that they're not used to being told that you have to play the footballs, the basketballs, the soccers, and all those other sports that are out there?
Yeah. Oh, you can go, Kubet.
I was just going to say, and Arshay probably has a lot more experience with this in terms of his experience, but I think one of the easier ways in terms of introducing the sport is on the rowing machine. You know, it's something that you can easily transport into a gym. I remember my brother was rowing, and there was just a small community rowing club, but I got on an old like Model B Concept 2 machine, and it gives you an idea of the rowing movement. And I think it's a good way in.
Yeah, I agree with Kubet. I think it's that's why I mentioned earlier the PE takeovers, where PE teachers allow you to come in and bring ergs in, and just to build relationships with young people, to learn their names, right? I'm sure they're tired of doing the same thing in PE class, and just get to know the coaches in their school, right? And get to know the staff there. And I think bringing them out to the water, right? And not just them, maybe their close friends and some family members, and put them on a barge or a boat with life jackets so they can feel safe, and really using skilled coaches to kind of just make them feel not only welcome, but making sure they have fun on the water, right? Maybe, there's an 8 and another 8, and the boats are racing in pairs or by 4s, right? So I think it's just really going, again, show this film, right? And there's a version in the fall that's coming out that's middle school friendly, high school friendly, I think that's what it is, right? I think also this film, you see yourself. It's all about seeing yourself, right? And I wanted to always see myself in the sport through others, and so I think that's what it is. And I think the last thing is that young kids want to see themselves somewhere. It's vision, giving them vision. If you do this, you would travel, right? You're gonna go to camps in the summertime. You're gonna race. You're gonna win medals, right? You're gonna have Kubet that's gonna come out, right? And she's gonna teach you and train you. You're gonna visit the boat. You're gonna visit Hudson Boats to see how boats are made. Like, it's pretty awesome. Like, just like all these, just give them vision, right? And they will see themselves there, right? And say, just come out with your friends, right? And there'll be a pizza party every other Friday. It's just think they want to do other things. And so I think it's really just kind of selling them on some of that, the vision and some of the great things that come with the sport.
It's so beautiful. I am mindful of time. I just wanted to let everybody know we might go a couple of minutes over 8:30, but I know you guys are like, that's totally fine because these people are amazing. We could hear them talk all night, but being mindful of their time as well. I have a couple more questions. Justine Gilbert, if you're out there and you would like to share your question yourself, otherwise I'm happy to read it. Justine, are you there? Okay, so I don't, oh, yeah. Okay, Justine is there.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, great. I was wondering, and this also applies to Kubet and Arshay. So, what would you say were the biggest challenges to achieving your athletic potential? Did you find that it was more the demand of the sport? As we know, rowing is not an easy sport. Or did you find that it was what was going on outside of the sport and in your home lives?
I guess I can start. I so some of the biggest challenges I had were like minimal exposure in terms of the sport. So I first started rowing at U of T in '94 after having a little bit of experience in Tillsonburg. And so I think I had a very little amount of technical knowledge in rowing. I had a lot of fitness that carried over from track and field, but the time in the boat and the time on the water was relatively minimal. And part of that is the winter season in terms of Canada. Part of that is just access to small boats. You know, we rowed more big boats, and when you go to the national team, you row in pairs. So you have to have small boat rowing, which I didn't have. So some of the technical skill, in terms of the technical skill, because it's a very skilled sport, that was a huge challenge for me. And then I think the other huge challenge was, it was the understanding that pathway and financially knowing how that was going to work. And just not having exposure from people that I knew within my community. So those were the two biggest obstacles. And also it's a process, with rowing, you, like Arshay said, you can't just rely on your own individual strength and competitiveness. You have to learn how to work as a crew and find that cohesiveness within the team. So I think those were my biggest challenges.
Yeah, I would say, and I say this, I would say it quickly. It's the story of this coach who took this 2x4, this long piece of wood, and he put it on the ground, and he told all his athletes to get on a 2x4 and walk across the 2x4, one foot in front of the other, don't touch the ground to the other side. And the whole team got on a 2x4 and walked on the 2x4 to the other side, very easy. They took two 10-foot ladders and he put the 2x4 on top of the two 10-foot ladders. And there was an extra ladder in the back. He said, all right, now go across the 2x4 on top of this 10-foot ladder. And no one would do it. Everyone got scared. He said, it's the same 2x4, same coach, same you, same balance. What changed? And what changed was the environment change. And for me, we were able to compete in the erg room. We were fast than the other kids in the erg room. We was out in the water when we practiced. We saw the other teams and we seemed to move pretty fast. But I think when we got out there, right, and we saw that, not only everyone was white, right, the environment changed, we had a lot of fear and we couldn't perform. Not only that, when we go back home, right, like we was made fun of all the time for rowing, right? They would sing row, row, row your boat. And so I think the issues we had was the change of environments, right? We were still strong, right? It was the same sport, same coaches, same technique. Like we were good, and so it was hard to handle the environment. And so that was the big challenge for us. And it was something that we wasn't quite, and we got better every day, but it was something that, we couldn't quite master as high school athletes.
Thank you so much for that. I wanted to ask if Alice, this is a question about the book specifically in that process, Arshay. Allison, are you in the room?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Oh yeah. So I saw the movie and I thought, wow, it really gives us a lot to think about. I haven't read the book yet, but I have it. So I was curious, I guess, when you started on the book, was it 2015? I think, but correct me if I'm wrong. Did you have a certain audience in mind that you hoped would read that and be, impacted or not? And then same with the movie. I'm just wondering if you had a vision for where you hoped it would end up for both those projects. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was number one to just tell this story, right? There's so many stories out there that great stories that that no one even heard of, right? It took 22 years to kind of tell this story. But I think it was to inspire young people from Manly. I wrote it for Manly, right? For those young people. You know, when I write, I have a very specific audience in mind. It was for Manly. And I think for the film, it was not only for Manly, but also those who live in the world of privilege, right? Those who row. And, you know, that I think that's how we got that was the goal for the film. And also, I think too, is that representation piece, that visibility piece. We wanted young people to see that there were Black men out there and still rowing, and you can make it cool. You can make the sport cool, and you can have a good time in the sport.
Awesome. There's a question from Michael, who's actually not in the webinar, but I really wanted to ask you both this question with your level of expertise. And the question is, these narratives we're listening to are narratives of intersectional identities, race, class, gender, and that they coalesce around sport. And can Kubet and Arshay speak to how Row Ontario, for example, is addressing sexuality so it's increasingly diverse and inclusive, like to gender expansive identities?
So I can speak on behalf of Row Ontario and the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And it's something that is, we're at the stage where we're listening. We're trying to get some understanding of where things are at and looking at policies. And that was something that has been looked at in terms of policy, actual policy within Row Ontario, and people in the LGBTQ community and gender identity, and possible entries, like down to entries for regattas. So it is on the radar, and I just want to be very upfront with everybody that the committee is very new. So we've sent out, I think, one survey to rowing clubs within Ontario with a little bit of feedback. It was kind of an optional survey, but we need a lot. We're at the stage of kind of information gathering, understanding where we need to be in terms of a 5-year strategic plan. What we don't have set in place is like, what are the steps to get there? What things do we need to really iron out so that it's easier for clubs to know? It's easier for coaches to have that training. There's that education piece, there's that policy piece. So I know that's definitely on the radar with Row Ontario.
Yeah, I would say the same thing that's happening with US Rowing. I'm not on the committee, but right now we're bringing in so many different people, and they're listening. They're just listening. And I think, at first it was a group of just rowers, and now they bring in other athletes from other sports to help, right? Who has a little bit of an advantage than just us rowers. And that's where we're at in the conversation is happening. And I am very optimistic, and so is others, but I'm hopeful that we're on our way.
So we're at the starting line, back to that metaphor of the sprint, we're back to so I'm going to ask the last question just because I can. And I'm going to ask you what your warm-up music is, because I want to know this. I feel like at Kubet, you were hinting that it was Can't Touch This, but I could be wrong. We were talking about the 90s. So, which all of us were in that phase. We were all like roughly the same age group. So that music. So tell me about your warm-up music.
For me, especially at that time, it's called Follow Me by Ali Us. Because this rowing is all about follow the person in front of you. I mean, it has, Chicago, you know, it's the originator of house music. So it has that, and it's called Follow Me. And it's, I mean, the words is so inspirational, right? I mean, when they said follow me, they wasn't talking about rowing, but they said follow me to a place where, you know, we can end, like, you know, hate and racism. And I mean, just amazing literature over a really great house beat, and it's called Follow Me. So that was always my warm-up. Until this day, I still use it.
Kubet?
I cannot be that specific. I'm sorry. I have my Spotify playlist and it's like 90s hip hop and
Oh yeah.
hit rewind and but yeah, I love all that stuff. But yeah, I don't know if I had any one sort of anthem warm-up song that I can contribute, but yeah, I'm down there on the erg and it's going.
We used to have
No.
at Argos, we used to have I went through a huge phase of Timbaland. So Love to Love You would put on the dock. I know I'm aging myself with Timbaland in early days, but Love to Love You would be blaring from the dock and it would confuse the other rowers. But it was that was the warm-up song. So I really do appreciate this because, you know, sometimes you're vibing and sometimes. So I want to thank you both so tremendously for being here and having this space for us to listen and learn. And Arshay, one of the points where I choked up also in the film is when everyone's reading I Rise. Like that's, you had me. Like I was like, okay, we're going to do this where we start crying now. So just if you both could offer a reading or something that, even if it's a prayer or a wish for everybody listening, that's helped you. And I know I didn't prep you with this question and I'm sorry for that, but kind of not sorry. What would you offer to everybody else listening? Would it be that, Arshay, or would it be something different? And then Kubet.
I think it would be, it's actually, I always want to offer my, you know, like my book and poems I've written, but I think the thing that's been touching to me and to everyone, I have sent this documentary to, no matter who you are, where you're from, or what you want to learn, and how to break down stereotypes and barriers and become anti-racist. And not only that, how to engage and how to listen, is called a documentary called Cracking the Code. I thought it was great. And so I recommend that to everyone, Cracking the Code, especially before you go out to do this work. Watch it and you will learn so much from it. And so that's what I would say.
Kubet?
And I guess I would say that I think what we've learned today, and one thing that I would like all of us to take from this film and from this experience and from this discussion is that we're all part of the bigger picture. We're all connected, and I think we are all within that same boat, and we're rowing on the same crew. And I think one of the things that the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement and there's a long history there, but we all can contribute, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a financial contribution or a contribution of time. It can be a smile in the boathouse and a welcome. So I think I would just like to say that everybody that's here tonight, thank you for your contribution, and I thank you for being here and for taking the time to listen and join us, because we're all part of that. We're all connected.
That's beautiful. I again want to thank Kubet Weston, Arshay Cooper for being here. Please do follow them, and on social media, where can we find you both?
Yeah, Arshay Cooper on Instagram, and Arshay Cooper on Twitter.
I'm not on Twitter. I think I have like 3 followers on Twitter, but I'm on Instagram, Kubet Weston. Yeah.
Amazing. And please, if you don't already, please follow the Canadian Sport Film Festival on Instagram and on Twitter, and that would be excellent. And thank you very much, everybody, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Canadian
you.
Sports Film Festival. Thank you, Hudson. Thank you, everyone.